If you are looking to improve your Survivor gameplay and fix common mistakes, you have come to the right place. We are going to cover 5 very common mistakes that survivors do, and these little mistakes can form bad habits and make it a lot harder to rank up and get better at Dead by Daylight. But before we hop into fixing these mistakes, if you guys wouldn't mind, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It would mean the absolute world to me, but let's go ahead and cover our first tip. The first tip that we are going to cover is selecting the right perks that fit your playstyle. Now this is going to be completely subjective and everyone's going to be a little bit different. I do feel that not enough survivors focus on this, and this is one of those things that you just kind of learn the more you play Dead by Daylight. However, in my personal opinion, there should be 3 things that you should ask yourself whenever you are making a perk build. The first thing that you should ask yourself is, will my perks help me survive longer? The second thing that you should ask yourself is, will my perks help my team? And the third thing that you should ask yourself is, will my perks give myself and my team some sort of advantage? In my opinion, these questions are very important because sometimes you're going to run into situations where you're just not prepared, and sometimes this can cost you or your team the game. I want to go over normally what I run whenever I am playing Survivor. Now, however, I do change it up from time to time, but most of the time in my loadout I have Wiretap, Reassurance, Distortion, and usually Kindred, or I'll throw in Dead Hard or just some sort of exhaustion perk. So as you can see, I like to use a very stealthy playstyle. See, the important thing with these perks that I am running is more or less I'm playing very stealthy, or at least that's how my perks are set up, but I'm also helping my team by showing where the killer is if I get hooked and I'm using Kindred, or if I'm using Wiretap and the killer happens to go by the generator. My whole team's going to be able to see where the killer is at. So just with these perks alone, I'm actually able to help support the team and kind of give them information, and also work on generators. But of course, your build and your playstyle is probably going to be very different from mine, but this will kind of give you an idea of what I mean whenever you are making a loadout when playing Survivor. But let's go to tip number 2. The second tip we are going to cover is being over-altruistic. This is hands down one of the most common mistakes at all levels of play in Dead by Daylight. I've done it, you've done it, we've all done it. How many times have you rescued someone off the hook, or someone has rescued you and the killer is right there? Now obviously you're not trying to intentionally farm the survivor, but sometimes it's happened, and sometimes it can be quite hard to hear the killer's terror radius. One of the best ways to avoid doing this is either to run Kindred or Spine Chill, or just wait until the killer's terror radius is gone. But personally, I think Kindred will give you the most information because you can see exactly where the killer is going once they have hooked someone. I know since not everyone runs Kindred, we're actually going to show you one example real quick of where we actually get a survivor off the hook and we don't have Kindred. So as you can see in this example here, Quentin gets hooked and we're moving around very cautiously. The reason why we are moving very cautiously is because we can hear the killer's terror radius. I keep moving around slowly until I'm able to get up to Quentin and safely unhook him. Once I get Quentin off the hook, I'm able to heal him very quickly because I have the perk Will Make It. This is just one way to, not farm someone, or at least not be too over altruistic. Just always be mindful of listening to the killer's terror radius, and just make sure whenever you go in for a save, if you're not running Kindred, just to always make sure that the killer is not, right next to the hooked survivor. Now let's cover an example of where being over altruistic can cost you and your teammates. As you can see here in this clip, we get hooked by Bubba in the basement. Leon is right above me and he decides to go into the locker right above us, which, is actually a really good idea, but he does get caught by Bubba. Now the reason why this is very important is because even though Leon was actually trying to, make the save, unfortunately he did give Bubba an extra kill, so what could have been just a 1k, unfortunately Bubba got a free 2k. But I just wanted to point out this example of what happens sometimes whenever you get a little too over altruistic. Sometimes you end up giving the killer an extra kill. But let's go to tip number 3. The third tip that we are going to cover is moving around the map, more specifically whenever you are in the killer's terror radius. Now this tip is very important because sometimes it can decide whether you are being chased, or sometimes the killer will never even know that you were right there. We are going to cover an example of where this works out great for us, and this will actually illustrate very well what I mean. So as you can see here, Claudette goes down and we are right next to her and the killer. Now as we pause the clip, I want to show you this even though I have enough time to run away and I very well could have easily escaped no problem. I wanted to stay close to the hook survivor and I actually stay right with the killer and he kicks the generator. At this point the killer has no idea I am literally on the other side of the wall, and honestly he probably thinks that we ran away. After the killer leaves, I go ahead and unhook Claudette. Now you can use this concept for a lot of situations in Dead by Daylight, but this is just one example I wanted to show because this really shows how much being stealthy and not running away can actually benefit your team and you as well. But let's go to our fourth tip. The fourth tip that we are going to cover is having a plan to escape the killer. Now this is something I see very commonly whenever I am playing killer, especially whenever I'm going against very inexperienced survivors. Now whenever I say always having a plan, this can be applied to whenever you are working on a generator or just moving around the map. Always be aware of your surroundings so that way you can either have time to loop the killer or have enough time to go find a stealthy hiding place. I want to go over one example of where using this tip is actually quite useful. So as you can see, I am working on a generator and Wesker decides to come right back as soon as I touch the generator. And since I kind of already know how he plays, I know exactly what my plan is, I just go ahead and loop him around this particular area. So there are two things that I want to point out here. If you remember, this is the same area that I rescued Claudette from, so we've already been to this area and we kind of know what it looks like. I've already prepared just in case Wesker decided to come, and this actually works out quite well to our advantage. Now the other reason I wanted to point this out, and the reason why I think it's very important, is because a lot of inexperienced survivors would have just ran straight ahead, not with a game plan whatsoever, to keep the killer busy, or at least take the killer away from the generator. A third reason why this clip is very important is because let's say this killer decides to keep chasing me, I would have wasted way more of his time. Me looping him would have wasted more of his time, allowing my team to get more generators done. We actually did keep him busy for a while, but he did eventually leave us, so we get back on the generator. This was actually a really smart move on his part, just because if he didn't leave us alone, we actually would have wasted more of his time. This is why it's always very important to always have a plan whenever you are working on a generator or you're just traversing around the map. But let's go ahead and cover our fifth and final tip. The fifth tip that we are going to go ahead and cover is knowing when to leave. This is actually a very common mistake, a lot more common than you would think. Now this is one of those tips that you will learn the more that you play Dead by Daylight, but we're going to go ahead and cover two examples of where when knowing when to leave is going to help you and when not leaving can really hurt your team. In this clip we are going to show what happens when you actually stay around, and it actually goes quite well. This actually helps me and another survivor escape. So as you can see here in this example, we get downed by Nemesis and we are on the hook. There is one survivor working on the gate to my left and there is another survivor opening the gate behind me. Nemesis sees Kate opening the gate to my left and he decides to go after Kate. Jake gets the gate open that was behind me, and this is where actually hanging around can actually help the team. After the gate is open, he actually starts heading towards me, and once he realizes that Nemesis has picked up Kate, he comes in and unhooks me and we both escape. This was a really good and a really smart play on Jake's part because he had multiple options that he could have done. He easily could have left both of us on the hook, but he actually came back and he got me, and this allowed me to escape, and it denies Nemesis an extra kill. Now let's go ahead and cover an example of where not leaving actually could have cost us the game. In this clip, we get the gate open and Jane and Elodie are right here with me, and Jane goes down, and for whatever reason I decide to go ahead and follow the killer, and the killer downs me. Now, I want to say the only reason that we actually escaped was because the killer decided to go after Elodie, and honestly, he should have easily gotten a 4K because I should have left. Now, I wanted to share this example, especially whenever things go wrong, because sometimes people just refuse to leave until the last second and it ends up costing them. This is just one scenario where luckily it did work out for us, but most times when you hang around when you shouldn't, it doesn't always go that well. So always make sure if you are going to hang around, you have a reason for, kind of staying around to get a survivor, but if you have the option to leave, always make sure that you leave, because it's always better to be safe rather than sorry. Alright guys, we have reached the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for coming out to watch it. It means the absolute world to me. Let me know if these tips helped you and all that jazz, but I do hope that you have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next one, guys. Have a good one.